Hey, I'm Emma. I work from home as a web designer and life's been pretty good. My parents left me a decent inheritance, and I've been pretty stable financially. My best friend, Lily, is a bit of a character. She's all about astrology and is always reading star charts and horoscopes. I've never really bought into it, but she swears by it. One day, Lily comes over, all excited. "Emma, you have to see this," she says, waving some papers around. "What's got you so hyped?" I ask, rolling my eyes a bit. "I did your natal chart and found your perfect match. His name is Matt, and he's absolutely your soulmate," she says, eyes sparkling. I couldn't help but laugh. "Alright, fine. I'll meet him. But if he's a weirdo, you owe me a drink." "Deal," she grins, clapping her hands. So, Lily arranges a meetup. I'm feeling a bit skeptical, but curious. When I finally meet Matt, he turns out to be surprisingly normal. Tall, dark hair, a nice smile, nothing like the disaster I'd pictured. "Hey, I'm Matt," he says, extending his hand. "Emma, so, you're into astrology too?" I ask, trying to make conversation. He laughs, shaking his head. "Not really. Lily wouldn't stop bugging me about this, so I figured why not?" I chuckle. Same here. I was half expecting some crystal ball guy. We end up talking for hours. Turns out, we have a lot in common. We both love hiking, we're into the same movies, and we even like the same weird food combinations. I'm starting to think maybe there's something to this astrology thing after all. A few days later, we're texting nonstop. Matt seems genuinely interested in getting to know me. He asks about my work, my hobbies, and my family. We keep seeing each other, and things get serious pretty fast. Matt is kind, funny, and seems genuinely interested in me. One night, after a cozy dinner at his place, he takes my hand. "Emma, I know it's only been a few months, but I feel really connected to you. I don't want to rush things, but I can't see myself with anyone else," he says, looking into my eyes. I feel a flutter in my chest. "I feel the same way, Matt. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for." A few weeks later, we're officially a couple. Lily is over the moon. "I told you the stars don't lie," she exclaims when I tell her. As time goes on, Matt and I get closer. We start talking about the future, and he brings up the idea of me moving in with him. It feels right, so I agree. We're happy, and for once, everything feels perfect. Matt had convinced me that investing my inheritance in our home was better than stocks. Life had been pretty smooth after I paid off his $200,000 mortgage. With the leftover money, I gave the house a facelift, new furniture, a fresh coat of paint, the works. We were settling in nicely. One afternoon, Matt's phone rang, and he answered it, looking concerned. "Mom? What's going on?" I could hear his mom's frantic voice on the other end, though I couldn't make out the words. Okay, calm down. We'll be there as soon as we can," Matt said, hanging up the phone. He turned to me, his face pale. "Dad's had a stroke. He's paralyzed on his left side. We need to go, Emma." We packed quickly and hit the road. The drive was tense, with Matt gripping the wheel, barely saying a word. When we arrived at his parents' house, the place was in chaos. Susan, his mom, was in tears, and her back was acting up. "Matt, Emma, thank God you're here," Susan cried out, her face streaked with tears. "Your father, he can't move or talk, and my sciatica. I can't do anything." After a long, exhausting visit to the hospital, we got the details. George, Matt's dad, was in bad shape. He couldn't move his left side and couldn't speak. It was heartbreaking to see him like that. Back at the house, we needed a plan. "We should think about a care facility," I suggested. "They can provide the best care for George." "No. He doesn't want that. He wants to be at home," Susan snapped, looking furious. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Alright, what about hiring a nurse then?" Someone who can be here around the clock. Susan shook her head, her eyes filling with tears again. We can't afford that. We're running out of money. Matt looked at me, clearly pleadingly. Emma, we have to do something. Mom can't handle this alone. I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation. I can stay here for a while and help out. I work from home, so I can manage. It's not ideal, but we'll make it work. The next day, Matt and I set up a room for George downstairs, so he didn't have to deal with stairs. Susan was hovering, barking out instructions and complaints. This bed is too small. How is he supposed to be comfortable in this? She grumbled. It's what we have right now, Susan. We'll find something better soon, I said, my patience wearing thin. Finally, we got George settled in and comfortable. It was a relief to see him resting, even though he couldn't express it. The next morning, Matt had to head back to our city for work. Once Matt left, reality hit hard. But I was determined to help George recover and support the family, no matter how hard it got. Living with Matt's parents was a real grind. Susan's sciatica had her stuck in her chair, leaving me to take care of George and the whole house. She didn't lift a finger and always had something to complain about. Nothing I did seemed good enough for her. Emma, this soup is too salty, Susan grumbled one evening as I served dinner. It's the same recipe I always use, Susan, I replied, trying to keep my cool. Doesn't look like it. And you're always on that computer. You should be taking care of us, not just sitting around, she added, her tone sharp. I took a deep breath. I'm working, Susan. I need to keep my job to help with the expenses here. Work? It looks like you're just goofing off on that thing, she muttered, rolling her eyes. I swallowed my frustration and went to check on George. He couldn't speak, but his eyes followed me, showing a silent gratitude. It was tough seeing him like this, but I was determined to help him improve. I'll give you a massage now, George, I said softly, setting up the massage table. He blinked slowly, a small sign that he understood. I had recently finished a course in massage therapy to better care for him. As I worked on his muscles, I noticed he seemed to relax a bit. It was the only time he looked somewhat comfortable. A couple of months passed this way. Every day was a struggle to balance work and caregiving, with Susan's constant complaints in the background. Finally, after months of this routine, Susan's sciatica improved enough that she decided to visit Matt for a few months. Emma, I'm going to stay with Matt for a while. I need a break from this place, she announced one morning. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. That's great, Susan. I'm sure it will be good for you. As she packed her bags, I couldn't help but feel a sense of freedom creeping in. It would be just George and me, and I could finally set my own routine without her constant nagging. The day Susan left, I felt like I could breathe again. I went to George's room, and he gave me a look that said more than words ever could. It's just us now, George. We're going to make some real progress, I said, smiling at him. He blinked slowly, and I knew he was on board. With Susan out of the house, life became a lot more manageable. I set up a solid routine for George and me. Every morning, I'd start by helping him with his exercises. I'd lift his legs and arms, encouraging him to move as much as he could. I'd then move on to massaging his muscles, something I'd learned from my recent therapy course. This will help with the stiffness, George. Just hang in there, I'd tell him, working through the knots and tight spots. The days were long, but without Susan's constant nagging, I could focus better. My web design work became my escape, a few hours a day where I could lose myself in creativity. One afternoon, as I was setting up for George's therapy, I noticed something different. His fingers were twitching slightly. Hey, George, can you try moving your fingers for me? I asked, holding my breath. Slowly, very slowly, his fingers curled a bit. It wasn't much, but it was the first movement I'd seen in weeks. I felt a rush of excitement. That's great, George. Keep going, just like that. I encouraged him. His eyes lit up with a spark of hope. From that day on, we worked even harder. Every little twitch, every small movement was a victory. I started incorporating more exercises, pushing George to do a bit more each day. The weeks passed, and George's improvement was steady. One day, as I was helping him stand, he managed to take a step with some support. "Look at you, George. You're walking," I exclaimed, almost jumping with joy. Our daily routines became more rigorous. We'd walk a few steps every day, and George's confidence grew with each one. His strength was returning, slowly but surely. One evening, after a particularly good session, I decided to sit down and have a chat with him. "George, you're really making amazing progress. How are you feeling about all this?" I asked, sitting next to him. He took a deep breath and managed to say, "Better, thanks, Emma." Hearing him speak, even if just a few words, was like music to my ears. "You're welcome, George. We're a team, and we're going to get through this together," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. As the months rolled on, George continued to improve. He was now able to move around the room with some assistance, and could feed himself with a bit of help. Our bond grew stronger through this journey. We shared more conversations, even if they were simple and slow. "George, you're really a fighter. I'm so proud of you," I said one morning as we sat in the garden, enjoying the fresh air. "Couldn't do it without you," he replied, his words clearer than before. We both sat there, enjoying the moment. It felt good to see him reclaiming parts of his life that had seemed lost forever. His spirit was strong, and his determination was inspiring. Over time, George and I grew very close. He started calling me his daughter, which warmed my heart. One day, we were sitting in the garden, enjoying the sunshine, when I decided to ask something that had been on my mind. "George, why didn't you want to go to a nursing home when you got sick?" I asked gently, looking into his eyes. He looked surprised. "Never said no," he replied slowly. "Saved money for good place." I was taken aback. "But Susan said you didn't want to go, and that there wasn't any money for it." George frowned, a serious look crossing his face. "Didn't know that," he said, his voice firm despite the struggle to speak. "We'll figure out." After months away, I decided to surprise Matt with a visit home. I was excited, thinking about how happy he'd be to see me. I packed my bags, said a quick goodbye to George, and hit the road. The drive felt longer than usual, my mind racing with thoughts of reuniting with Matt. When I finally pulled into our driveway, it was already dark. I grabbed my bags and walked up to the front door, but something felt off. My key didn't fit the lock. Confused, I tried again, but it was no use. I rang the doorbell, hoping Matt would answer, and this would all make sense. A woman I didn't recognize opened the door. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking puzzled. "I'm Emma, Matt's wife. This is my house. Who are you?" I replied, feeling a knot forming in my stomach. "I'm Karen. This house was sold a couple of months ago. I'm just here to keep an eye on it," she shot back. My mind went blank for a second. "Sold? That's impossible. This is my home." "I'm sorry, but it's not anymore," she said, looking genuinely sorry. I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling. I dialed Matt's number, my heart racing. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, Emma. What's up?" he said, his voice sounding oddly calm. "Matt, I'm at our house, and some woman says it's been sold." "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking. He sighed, a cold edge in his voice. "Yeah, I sold the house. I bought a new one for Mom and me." "What? You sold our house without telling me? Where am I supposed to go?" I shouted, feeling a mix of anger and confusion. "There's no place for you in the new house, Emma. I sent the divorce papers. Didn't you get them?" he replied, his tone icy. I felt like the ground was falling away beneath me. "Divorce papers? Are you serious, Matt? I paid off your damn mortgage. How could you do this to me? He laughed, a cruel sound. You can't prove any of that. The house was in my name. It's over, Emma. Move on. Tears stung my eyes as I tried to process his words. What about your father? Who's taking care of him? Dad? He's not my problem anymore. Mom and I don't need him dragging us down. If you want to play nurse, take him. I don't care, Matt said coldly, hanging up the phone. I stood in the parking lot of what used to be my home, the darkness surrounding me, feeling utterly lost. My conversation with Matt had left me dumbfounded. I couldn't believe he had sold our house, abandoned his father, and sent me divorce papers without a second thought. My phone buzzed, jolting me out of my daze. It was George. Emma, come back. Need to talk, George said, his voice weak but urgent. I'm coming, George. I'll be there soon, I replied, my voice shaking. I got into my car and drove through the night, my mind a whirlwind of anger, sadness, and confusion. By the time I reached George's place, it was early morning. Exhausted, I walked through the door and saw George waiting for me, his eyes filled with concern. George, I don't know what to do, I stammered, feeling the tears welling up. I couldn't hold it in any longer and burst into tears right on his shoulder. He led me to the living room and helped me sit down. Tell me, what happened? He said, looking at me with those kind eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Matt sold the house, George. He said there's no place for me and that he doesn't care about you either. He sent me divorce papers. George's face hardened, a rare show of anger. I knew they were up to no good. What do you mean, George? I asked, wiping my tears. After my stroke, couldn't speak, they talked, in front of me. He began, his voice trembling with the effort. What did they say? I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. They planned everything. Told me they'd get your money, sell house, kick you out, George said, his eyes filled with pain. I stared at him in horror. They actually said that? How could they be so cruel? Thought I couldn't understand. But I did, he continued, his voice getting stronger. They also wanted to get rid of me. Sell my house. Tears streamed down my face as I listened. I can't believe they'd do this to their own family. George took a deep breath. I've taken care of everything. What do you mean? I asked, looking at him, confused. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys, handing them to me. I bought Matt's house. It's yours now. I looked at the keys, then back at George, feeling a wave of emotion. You did this for me? Why? Because you deserve it. You paid for it. Not them, he said firmly. I burst into tears again, but this time they were tears of happiness and relief. Thank you, George. I don't know what to say. As I sat there, holding the keys to my new home, I felt a mix of gratitude and determination. George had given me a second chance, and I was not going to let Matt and Susan's betrayal break me. We were going to fight back, and we were going to win. Together. The next day, George decided it was time to make things official. He called a lawyer to the house to change his will. Emma, need you to be the heir, George said, looking determined. Are you sure, George? I asked, feeling a mix of gratitude and concern. Yes, it's right. You took care of me, not them, he replied, his voice steady despite his condition. The lawyer arrived, and we sat down at the kitchen table. George explained his wishes, and the lawyer nodded, drafting the new will. I felt a lump in my throat as George signed the papers, making me the sole heir to all his property. A few days later, I met with Jack again, bringing all the documents and evidence we had gathered. Jack was impressed with the thoroughness of our preparation. Emma, this is solid. We've got everything we need to go after Matt and Susan, he said confidently. I'm ready to fight, Jack. Let's get that $200,000 back, I replied, feeling a surge of determination. Jack filed the lawsuit, demanding the return of my money. We also provided evidence from the bank, with witnesses confirming the transfer of funds. It was a strong case, and I felt hopeful about our chances. A few days later, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Matt and Susan standing there, looking desperate. "Emma, we need to talk," Matt said, his voice shaky. I crossed my arms, glaring at them. "What do you want?" "Please, Emma, we're sorry. We didn't mean for things to go this far," Susan said, her voice trembling. "Sorry? You two planned this from the start. You lied, stole my money, and tried to kick me out," I shot back, feeling my anger rise. "Emma, please, let's work something out. We don't want to go to court," Matt pleaded, his face pale. I shook my head, my voice cold. "I don't want anything to do with people like you. And by the way, George has recovered and transferred all his property to me. You two are left with nothing." Matt's face turned ghostly white, and Susan's eyes widened in shock. She fainted right there on my doorstep. Matt just stood there, speechless. "Get her out of here, Matt. I don't have time for your games," I said, pointing towards their car. He nodded, still in shock, and dragged Susan to the car. As they drove away, I felt a strange sense of closure. A few weeks later, the court ruled in my favor. I was awarded the $200,000, and the divorce was finalized. It was a long, hard battle, but I had won. I drove back to George's house, feeling lighter than I had in months. As I walked in, George looked up, his eyes full of curiosity. "How did it go?" "We won, George. I got the money back, and the divorce is final," I said, tears of joy streaming down my face. We sat together in the living room, the weight of the past months lifting off our shoulders. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where we could finally find peace and happiness. Life had settled into a peaceful routine after all the chaos. I lived in my own house now, and George was a regular part of my life, like the father who passed away early and whom I hardly remember. We spent our days tending to the garden, chatting about old times, and simply enjoying each other's company. It was nice to have this calm after the storm. One sunny afternoon, as I was sipping coffee on the porch, my phone rang. It was Lily, my astrologer friend, who had introduced me to Matt. "Hey, Emma. You won't believe what I've found in your chart this time." Lily's voice was bubbling with excitement. I chuckled, already guessing where this was headed. "Oh boy, what is it now, Lily?" "You've got a new love coming your way. He's perfect for you, even better than the last one. The stars don't lie," she said, practically squealing with joy. I burst out laughing, shaking my head. "Lily, after everything that happened, I think I've had my fill of horoscope-based romances. But Emma, this one is different. The alignment is just right. You've got to trust me on this," she insisted. "Lily, I appreciate it, but I'm focusing on myself for now. If Mr. Perfect is out there, he'll find me without the stars' help," I replied, feeling more amused than annoyed. After hanging up, I couldn't help but laugh at the whole conversation. Despite everything, Lily's enthusiasm was infectious. But I knew I was in no rush to jump into anything new. I was content with my life as it was. George wheeled himself onto the porch, looking curious. "Who was that?" "Lily. She's trying to set me up with another perfect match from the stars," I said, rolling my eyes playfully. George chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "Stars didn't work so well last time." "Exactly. I told her I'm done with horoscope dates. I've got enough on my plate without adding a new guy into the mix," I replied, grinning. "You'll find someone when the time's right," George said, giving me a knowing look. I looked out at our garden, feeling a deep sense of contentment. The flowers were blooming, and the vegetables were coming along nicely. It was a little paradise we had created together. "You know, George, this is all I need right now. A simple life, good company, and a bit of sunshine," I said, taking a deep breath of the fresh air. "Perfect life," he agreed, smiling. A few days later, I got another call from Lily, but this time it was just to chat. No horoscope predictions, no matchmaking, just catching up like old friends. It felt good to keep things light and easy. One evening, as I was watering the garden, I thought about what the future might hold. I knew that someday, I'd meet someone who would appreciate me for who I am, without needing the stars to tell us we were meant to be.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their inn. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.